When I first started calling myself an effective altruist, it was hard to talk about EA to other people. If it came up, I would sometimes find myself backed into a corner, trying to defend utilitarianism to someone who didn't want to be convinced. These conversations didn't feel productive, so for a while, I kept EA to myself. Eventually, I looked for carefully worded ways to explain EA that avoided contentious topics and focused on more universally accepted topics. It turns out that just because most people don't want to have long philosophical discussions, look at graphs, and listen to 3-hour podcasts, does not mean they don't want to do a lot of good. So what should we say to these people? Enter internal versus external movement building. Internal movement building is growing or improving the EA community. The EA Global Conference is a great example. External movement building is spreading EA ideas in ways that do not involve the EA community. In external movement building, there's no specific intention to recruit EAs, and in some cases of this, it could be disadvantageous to even mention EA. Rachel Atchison, who I believe we are also hearing from, probably does this in political situations. Just because she fights hard and wins for EA-aligned policies in government doesn't mean it's strategic to promote the EA movement itself in her work. So why might we want to do external movement building? This is why. The animal rights movement found incredible power in recent years by getting lots of people to eat less meat instead of getting just a few people to eat no meat. It seems like there could be a lot of potential in the big orange circle of people who will never be effective altruists. Here are some other reasons to engage in external movement building. As big as possible may not be the ideal size for the EA community. And if we promote good ideas but de-emphasize the EA movement itself, it could shield EA from drama. If EA becomes mainstream, that could be a one-way street, along with any pushback, politicization, and tainting of EA values. External movement building offers the best of both worlds. We can promote what we'd like, but if it doesn't go over well, we haven't put our movement on the line. Now that I've set the stage for why we might at least consider making some sort of appeal to the non-EA public, here is the big guiding question at the focal point of our discussion. What ideas, if any, would we, the EA community, want to spread to the general public? And how do we frame those ideas? We might want ideas that are not likely to be misinterpreted or misused. Good candidates will retain fidelity to the heart of EA without requiring EA policing. They'll give a clear and foolproof message as they spread around to avoid unwanted effects. They won't be contentious. I want the low-hanging fruit of ideas that people will agree with, but just maybe never considered. And they'll actually make an impact if applied. After almost 2 years of considering all sorts of EA ideas, countless conversations with non-EAs, and honing my formal talk for students through 4 iterations and nearly 200 kids, here is my current thinking. I think that when we talk to the general public, we should focus on these EA tools: cause and effect evidence, leverage, and personal advantages. Now I'll walk you through each of these, including how I approach them with students and some of my reasoning behind selecting them. To explain the importance of evidence, I show students 3 Facebook fundraisers and have them vote on which they would give to. After noticing we didn't have any real evidence past a photo and a caption, we look at each of the websites. The goal is to shock them about what can happen when you don't use evidence. And not just any evidence, cause and effect evidence that giving to a certain charity will cause a determined positive result. I've learned I have to be specific about calling it cause and effect evidence, or else students will come to me with evidence in the form of, say, fundraising data, which is not that useful to us. 2 of our 3 charity websites did not offer cause and effect evidence, and the result of that can be jaw-dropping. So how does the tool of cause and effect evidence stack up against my 3 considerations? Will not be contentious. It's hard for reasonable people to oppose the idea of using evidence to support decisions. Will actually make an impact if applied. If more people do things that have evidence of causing a good effect, then by definition, more good effects will be caused. Simple. And for this first one, okay, so in the first iteration of my lesson, I promoted the pursuit of measurable results instead of the pursuit of cause and effect evidence. It might seem like the contrast between the two is small, but small misunderstandings in my lesson helped to illuminate the notable difference between the choice of terms. Not everything that makes a positive impact is measurable. For example, there's abundant cause and effect evidence to support the idea that eating a healthy diet can help you live longer. But when a healthy eater eventually dies, it's impossible to measure how many days longer they've lived due to their healthy eating. It seems plausible that subtleties in wording could help EA ideas maintain their fidelity as they become more widely used by the public, so we want to get them right. This is the sort of consideration I've been making when thinking about ideas and terminology we want to promote. So I see the idea of cause and effect evidence as a clear message. In trying to explain the power of leverage to most people, I talk about the opposite extreme, what I call a no-leverage campaign. I might ask someone to name a favorite deceased celebrity. Maybe they say David Bowie. I ask if they would give money to a fundraiser or attend a protest to bring David Bowie back from the dead. They wouldn't? They don't care about David Bowie? Just kidding, I say. Just because something is a good cause or something we want to happen doesn't mean we should put resources into it. Most people, I tell them, don't consider this and waste resources on great causes where they're probably not going to make much progress. By the way, when I practice external movement building, I try not to argue against popular beliefs. For example, a popular belief might be that it's honorable to work on a cause that you have a personal connection to. So I'd likely get pushback if I told someone, just because a cause hits close to home doesn't mean working on it will do any good. I've learned instead to use popular beliefs to my advantage by appealing to beliefs that do support the idea of, in this case, leverage. For example, a popular belief I can use to my advantage might be that there is an unjust inequality between the rich and the poor. And among students, I get broad support when I say, wealthy countries have expensive, low-leverage problems, but get by far the most charitable funding. Poorer countries have plenty of inexpensive, high-leverage problems, but get left in the dust. I might show them this slide comparing cancer with the high-leverage schistosomiasis. All of a sudden, they feel the same outrage and injustice that most of us feel. The system is rigged against poor people who have diseases we haven't even heard about. So how does leverage stack up against my three considerations? Well, I think the idea of getting a good bang for your buck is hard to misinterpret, or for that matter, dispute. And it's fairly clear that if the general population were to employ more leverage when they help others, that they would help others more. Except, of course, for interventions that inadvertently have a negative effect. Discussing personal advantage is, in a way, an emotional appeal. I might parrot Peter Singer in making people realize that they could really, actually save lives with personal advantages they have, like living in a wealthy country, and maybe a skill set or position they're in, like being able to choose their major. I think the idea of personal advantage might be the weakest of the three in terms of fulfilling my three considerations, though it still may fulfill them. But I do intuit that this sort of reckoning with what they could be doing with the resources they have might be the psychological push certain people need in order to act. This is an opportunity to make altruism stick in people's minds. When someone is asked to identify a real personal advantage they have, then this conversation about helping others has transitioned from abstract to concrete. They've now connected a real element of their life with the good they can do with it. That's going to stick with them because it involves them personally. Something I like about all three of these tools is that they can apply to any type of altruistic act. I got some pushback from early iterations of my lesson that I focused too much on giving to charity. With a lot of students who might not yet be equipped to give or even in a financial mindset yet, some didn't feel like my talk applied to them, which I've now tried to change. Listen, just because we promote some ideas to the masses doesn't mean we shouldn't also be recruiting real EAers. So if you do meet someone who has a heart of gold, a PhD in economics, and a love of long podcasts, feel free to throw them the full Monty and kick off conversation with long-termism. Thank you. And I do just want to make a few quick notes before the Q&A session. Firstly, I intentionally avoided using specific cause areas or charities as my EA ideas to spread to the public, for reasons I can get into during the QA if you're curious. I would love to hear your feedback on evidence, leverage, and personal advantage. Do you have different ideas about what we should promote to the public, or whether we should reach out to the public at all? One possible shortcoming of my concept, it's human nature to do whatever you're going to do and justify it after. So maybe even if the public adapts these ideas, they'll somehow just use the ideas to justify what they're already doing. I have gotten some pushback about my use of schistosomiasis as an example. I hear you, but for now I'm just using it because it demonstrates a point. I do have some data and feedback from giving my lessons. Lots of positive, but also proof that students may have learned the ideas in theory, but didn't always internalize them in a concrete way. If you're in a position to present or talk to others about EA, I am more than willing to set up a video call, brainstorm with you, or give you all my materials to use as you please. If you're aware of any opportunity for me to get in front of high school or college students, please reach out. I do it for free. And one more thing before we start. Usually I come up with a much more substantive answer in the hours and days following something like this after thinking it through. So please feel free to contact me if you asked or wanted to ask a question, and I can give you something better than I came up with on the spot. All right, thanks so much.